And the first one is you were talking about Van Halen. I absolutely love the guitar tones you achieved when working with Van Halen. Could you share a bit about how those sounds were created?
And you just asked about that. Like with Eddie, um, most all Van Halen records are not double tracked because
Hmm.
he would play the part with all these nuances and squeals and all the, and for him to have to double that, you, not even just him, but guitar players, when they know they're going to double the guitar, simplify their part because they don't have to worry about learning every little personality nuance to have to double that because that's incredibly time consuming. And why, if you're doubling it, do you want to sort of make it sound that way, where you can't, because human beings, it's almost impossible to be perfect. So if this guitar is like perfect on its own, but you try to double it, you can hear all the imperfections then, where on its own, it's perfect, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, so the thing I did with Ed that was, I know that you don't come into a Van Halen record and tell Eddie, well, here, this is how we're going to do it. So you come in, to Ed's world and you see what he's doing. And he wasn't using ribbons. He was using one cabinet. He'd have two 57s and he'd split them and he would delay them a little differently. So they were doing this more electronic bounce,
Hmm.
but it was not a dedicated analog bounce of stereo left and right. So I came in and we talked about it, and I said, you've got this splitter here that you use for live. Do you want to try messing around with something that I do sometimes? And at the time, he was also designing a new head. He had a 50 watt, he had the 100 watt, he had the Mark II. You know, he's like, yeah, man, whatever. And so we started by just using two heads and two cabinets with the 57s, not an extra mic yet. And he already started to like that because that's like a natural stereo, because speakers don't move absolutely perfectly. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So the left and right speakers are just doing this little dance, which creates this little stereo air dance. It still sums to mono. It still comes out of the center, in its own way because it's one source, but it's one source into a splitter that's going into two heads. And I said, well, now you can, or you have all these different choices, because he had his like guitar and amp locker down. We're up at 5150, so it's on his own property. He has all his gear is in in a vault, in a like a air conditioned vault. And I said, why, just for me, can we pull out the old Marshall and can we pull out some of your old gear and start messing around? And so we started to do that, and we started to have a really good time with like blending two amps. And I said, I got one thing I want to do now. I said, because right now you've got this API on both 57s where you're lopping on like a shit gob of 50 cycles to add low end, because 57s don't have any bottom, and he's looking for bottom. I said, I got this microphone that we're working on with this company, Royer. It's a tube ribbon mic. At the time, it was called. It became the 122V, and the 122V is basically like a 121 or a 122, except it's tube. And so it's got a lot of detail, a lot of bottom, a lot of full range. It's really a killer microphone. So I said, I'm going to put these up. I want you to check them out and just play. We'll record them on separate tracks. So you'll have your 57s. Now you'll have your Royers. I can put them right in phase, perfectly in phase, where the ribbon and the capsule, they'll be as in phase as I can get them. And you can just play with them. And we'll take all the EQ off the 57s. And when you want more low end, Ed, God rest his soul, was a great engineer. He just amazingly intuitive and an incredible engineer on his own. And so he just sat there and would listen back, and he'd just turn the Royers up and down. And I would watch him as he turned the Royers up. He would start to really get off because the Royers are bringing in natural low end, not EQ'd low end to a microphone that doesn't have it. So it's a natural low end. It's not like a 50 cycle filter hump on an API. It's a mic that's capturing the low end that's at the speaker and also bringing in a whole nother frequency response that is the mid range too, killer low mids that start to make the guitar really speak.
Mm-hmm.
And he totally understood it within like 5 minutes of sitting there. He was like, yeah, man, fuck yeah. So we got rid of the EQ off the 57s, and it just became a balance between the Royer and the 57, which is what I was doing and still do. You know what I mean? It wasn't anything, but to watch Ed see that, and then we would pick, and we would do this thing where, like, to pick the blend of the left and right amps was also really fun because, we would get like a left side amp that he was really happy with, but it may not be blending with the right side amp. And so we would change that until that sound was something. And we would do this on our own time, because you're not trying to turn it, but it's his own studio. And we got this, and it's like, and some days we would just record a DI and feed it back and play around with it that way. So we could just keep changing shit until he was like, that's fucking awesome. And, so there were things that we did that made those guitar sounds special because he wanted something, he wanted to make space for Wolf's bass too. Like with Wolf's bass, we had it's a much grindier bass sound than on prior records because Wolf comes from more like 90s and 2000s alternative music bass sound, So one of the things I did do was just move the guitars a little wider by just using time adjuster. Because if you take the time adjuster off, they're mostly in the center. So you could put a little time adjustment of basically like a delay, but within samples, and just move them out just a little bit. They're not out of phase or anything because they're perfectly in phase. They just move a little wider to create more center space.
Aside from having excellent guitarists, how are AC/DC's guitars recorded?
Very, very basic. There's no pedals. Both the guys always hated to have any kind of pedal in the chain. So we'd have the shortest guitar lead as we could into the head, and then the shortest speaker cable that we could into the speaker cabinets. Now, sometimes that would be, 30, 40 feet, depending on how far away the ISO boosts were. But you'd have less loss in a long speaker cable than you do as a guitar cable. So the guitar cables we kept really short, like I would say, 8 feet or less, like really short ones. And that's their sound. So it's a pure thing. And when we do Angus's leads, we would have the speaker cabinet just sort of outside of the control room. So that would be a really short speaker lead and a short guitar lead. So, you get the full oomph of the guitar and it's not being lost in a long cable run.
Mm-hmm. And what about microphones?
Microphones, usually 57 and a 421. And I'll have my assistant kind of move them around to the speakers, say, oh, that sounds good. Move that one around. Yep, that sounds good. And then they pretty much stay for the whole session.
And how did you achieve Tom's guitar sound with that big distortion while still maintaining the clarity of the note?
That would be, we used the XFX 3, the Fractal XFX 3 for the whole record. It's a fantastic, fantastic unit. But the secret between all of that is stuff that even I would do in real life with real amps, is that you blend in amps. And so Tom's always had, in the Blink days, there was it was 3 amps. It was like a Marshall, a Mesa, and a twin reverb.
Mm-hmm.
And the twin reverb would just be completely clean. And that's probably something that you would hear the least. It's almost one of those things where it's in there enough so that you can hear the definition, but you don't know it's there. But if you mute it, you can tell there's a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't necessarily go the route of the 3 amp type thing, but I kind of used the Marshall Mesa approach. Um, being that the Marshall is kind of more of my notes and my tone and the clarity. Well, not the clarity, but more of like the more of the notes, if you will. Whereas your more distorted amp, which I think on here was some sort of Soldano, I think, um, is what built everything around that mid range. So your lower, all the saturation that fills up space and provides energy, but you still want the clarity and the punch of the Marshall esque sound, which isn't like 100% clean, but it has a little bit more of, you can hear all the notes when you strum through.
Mm-hmm.
And you just kind of blend between the two. If it's going to be a rhythm guitar, you probably need a little less of the note and more of the bigness. If it's a riff, you're going to want more of the note and less of the bigness. And then, using that concept between um, different amps, different cabinets, obviously all within the fractal, but you still have to really use that mindset
Mm.
um, that you would have with real amps with you know the guitar. What do they call them now? The amp sims or whatever.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I think if you have those concepts down in your head, then navigating the world within the fractal becomes easy.
And so did he play it like twice? One for each amp, or he played once?
Oh no, it'd be once,
Mm-hmm.
and then the signal gets split. One, the signal goes to one amp, and then the other amp, and then they'd meet back up, and then I'd have a general EQ. I also use the Manley stereo Pultec EQ, the mastering EQ a lot, because that has an amazing like broad range, especially like in the 1K, 1.5 to 2K area. Just getting that in, and I that was definitely something that was inspired by Jerry Finn because he did
Mm-hmm.
that as well. And so yeah, it would be the fractal, and then it'd go out to something with tubes and compressors if I needed it, if it was something cleaner. Um, but yeah, I can't even really say that we used any pedals even.
Oh.
Like I think everything was in the fractal.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, you use it the same way you would do it in the studio with all the real gear.
And did you also record with the DI just in case you needed to reamp later?
Oh yeah, everything, all DIs are always recorded, and because as long as you keep track of what guitars you're using per track, you're then able to punch in stuff quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just reamp. And it's such a lifesaver because sometimes it's one of those things where it's like, oh, we're going to change this chord in all the choruses. And it's like, instead of having to go in there and redo everything, you just go in and punch in that chord on whatever spots you need to. And it's done, as opposed to, all right, we got to play the whole thing again, try to get the guitar tone to be like as good. Mics may have moved, like what cabs do we have up, all that stuff. So just having the DIs at all times. And then a lot of the thing, Travis a lot would slow certain parts of the song down or speed them up. Like the choruses would be like 2 BPM faster. Um, so I would then be able to avoid having to do the elastic audio, which I think a lot of times degrades
Mm-hmm.
the quality. And because you have the DI, you can do things by hand a little bit more. And I don't know, it's just a lot more malleable as far as that goes. But yes, 100% always DIs for everything.
Mm-hmm. And when they recorded the guitars, had the bass already been recorded?
Sometimes, yes, sometimes there might be a scratch bass,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, there would just be some sort of a bass. If it was something that started at, at Tom's, then I'd go ahead and lay some sort of a scratch bass down. And, then, obviously with Mark in mind of like, oh, what would Mark do? Um, and then send it off and then let him do his own thing. And obviously get whatever tone he would get, whatever tone he thought was what suitable for the song. And that, but I mean, I feel like bass is one of those things where it's almost easier to get a bass tone when you have all of your guitars
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to when you just have drums because you kind of don't have context. And I find that when you don't have guitars, you tend to be a lot more careful with the mid range and the top end of a bass. And the second you have guitars in there, then you can't hear anything because you weren't as aggressive as you needed to be
Mm-hmm.
with the EQ and whatnot, or with just the tone in general. So I mean, that's even one of those things where it is important to have the context of all the other instruments when you're dealing with the bass. I think when I'm talking to you about in the beginning of the mix, when we're talking about um, the vocal, bass, and drums, and making sure those are kind of locked down, more so in the low end of the bass as opposed to the top end. I like the top end of the bass. I'll start kind of dialing in more once I have guitars and vocals in, so I can figure out where I want it to sit.
And what are some details in that record that most listeners might miss, but you're really proud of?
I think the fact that it was done in 2, 3 different studios and it doesn't sound that way. I think that's something that sometimes it's hard to really get going and understanding. But I mean, that was the thing. Like, I would want the drums to be as finished as humanly possible. And the drums that I would get from Travis's studio would be fully mixed the way he kind of intended it. So I'm just like, all right, if that's where we're at, then I'm able then to cater the guitar tones more in the direction of what we have there. And it's building blocks
Mm-hmm.
in terms of sonics. But I think that's a really big thing. And just the fact that it would be cohesive.
Jerry Cantrell's guitars on Check My Brain are just amazing, and they're so hypnotic. How did you record those guitars?
That was a massive setup. So, we have, one, you have Jerry Cantrell. I mean, the guy just, he's an amazing player. Two, we're holed up at 606 Dave Grohl's studio. We had, I believe it was 5 cabinets mic'd up. So we had his Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
We had an orange, and we had his Bogner Fish going through a Mesa Boogie power amp, 2 channels out because it was massive. So that had 2 cabinets. And I think there was one more cabinet with what other head was that? Anyways, so we have 5 cabinets, and they all have 2 microphones on them. So between 421s and 57s and SM7s and FET 41s, FET 47s. I'm sorry. We had to move those mics around until phase was extremely tight, and then we per cabinet, and then each cabinet had to be as tight to the next cabinet, and isolating those, and and then Cantrell came in, fired up his rig, played a couple of chords, turned around and looked at us, and we were like, all right, we got it. Our job was done. He's got a smile on his face. But so those guitars on that record are 3 passes for the main rhythms. There's a left, a right, and a center. And he's just that tight with himself. It sounds like one big performance.
And what mic pre's do you use for that?
That was all Neve.
Neve?
Yeah. So this was the Neve board that was at Dave Grohl's studio before he purchased the Sound City Neve. So this was an inline console. It was, pretty slick and lots of, a little bit more modern than the 8028. But still a great sounding desk.
So how do you deal with phase cancellation with all those mics? I remember this was, I guess, back in 2006 or something like that, working on Michael Wagner's studio. I remember the way he did it was just using like headphones. The amp was really loud. He was using, I don't know, some kind of, maybe the noise of the amp or some kind of white noise, and then like I think he panned the microphones, and when the sound came from the center, the phase was just perfect. Something like that. Yeah. If I remember right. So how do you do that?
I guess that's one trick. I haven't heard of that one, but it makes sense. So what I do is, I'll find the sound with on one speaker, and then my cabinets are, they'll all be the same speaker. Either 65, 75s or vintage 30s. Dial in a sound with the one main speaker, and then on the next speaker, positioning that mic to where it is, as close. Now I'm looking at capsules, how far the capsule is from the grill.
Okay.
And I'll pull that capsule back and forth until, visually it looks like it's right on, and then I'll go back to the control room, and we'll play, and I push that fader up until it cancels out. And if I can't get that fader to cancel out, like really make that original mic signal as thin as it possibly can be, then I've got to move the mic around some more. Make sure I can really, make sure that that's adding. So once I get that in place, then I just blend in and have whichever microphone to lead, and then tuck in what else I need to hear, rather than just going straight to an EQ.
And how loud were the amps?
Very loud.
Very loud.
Yeah, very loud. Like we want the speakers to push, and we want the amp to do most of the work instead of the mic pre's pick. You have to gain up a mic pre, so we're pushing into the microphones pretty loud.
And before I forget, the FET 47s were for like room mics, or they were close to?
They were right on the speaker cabinet. So that's what made checking phase difficult, because that capsule is in the middle of this, it's kind of a cylinder. So you have to figure it's about almost an inch away from, if you're right up on the grill, you're almost an inch and a quarter away. So now if you've got a 421 or a 57, you have to make sure that microphone is the same distance from that speaker. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I on Rainier Fog, we're doing the same thing. We're up in Seattle, and I had a piece of tape on my phone, and because I was using that as my flashlight, because it was always on me, and I had a piece of tape, and I had marks for where like the 47 FET capsule meets. Like I had markings on the tape, and so where the FET met on this piece of tape, this little line, I could go to the other speaker and pull the 57 to the exact same spot. And then that just saved time. So almost like a ruler, but it worked.
Cool. Do you use not for recording, but maybe for mixing something like the Autoline plugin?
What's this plugin?
Autoline.
Autoline.
Yeah.
No, because what we do is, I'm a fan of committing to the guitar sound. So I'm bussing all of these mics together. So creating one sound. So it's and you can't change it. It's, you know, if somebody else is going to mix this thing, they can't goof that up because it's already been summed down. You know, however many mics there were to create it, it's one track. And I really like that because I get sessions and everything's got an output, or, you know, and everything's got a track, and I'm like, all right, well, I just imported all these audio files. All my faders are at 0. Is this where they wanted these tracks? Mm-hmm. You know, whether it comes from, you know, Logic or whatever, you know, DAW they're using. So I like to commit.
That's perfect. So was there any distortion pedal used, or was it just the amps?
We were getting the gain from the amps. If we need an extra little push, like it was the Laney Clip. That was that other amp. Okay. So and that just has an insane breakup. But that amp, you know, it's kind of on the cleaner side. It's super loud, but that clip circuit is so wild. But we'll stick like a TS-808 on there, like a tube screamer. Mm-hmm.
Like
so that would be the only. You know, like, Cantrell has one of those new hardwired versions, the reissue, and it sounds great. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Is Jerry usually in the control room or in the live room?
If they're tracking with Sean, they'll all be in the live room. When we're actually, so we'll track and get the drum take, like capture the energy, the push and the pull, and all the intensity and that. Then when we're ready to track guitars, he's in the control room with all the heads, and we have like speaker cables going out into the live room, and like a pretty elaborate setup, because, you know, Jerry likes to paint with, you know, his guitar tones, so we have to have lots of options available.
Mm-hmm. And when he doubles the guitars, does he use the same guitar or switch to a different one?
No, usually. So, like, you know, if he's using a Rampage, he might use his other Rampage on the other side. But mostly he's, you know, all right, there's a Rampage on one side and a Les Paul on the other side, and there'll be an SG or a V or something else in the center. Mm-hmm. So that helps create width.
So talking about guitars, what are your go-to microphones and preamps for capturing electric guitars?
You know, I'm very old school when it comes to the preamps in general, because I grew up on consoles. Mm-hmm. You know, we didn't like bring all these Gucci custom preamps in the studio when we made records. You were on a Trident console, you were on an Eve console, you're on an API console. You might even be on like a sound workshop or a Neotech or whatever the heck you were on. And that's what you put your mics through. You know what I mean? But the mic is the deal for me. I'm a big proponent of Royer. I've been using the Royer mic since the get-go. I'm sort of the poster child for Royer guitar. Mm-hmm. Like I've always, but going back into guitars in the 80s, like Motley Crue, when I was doing Girls with Dwayne Barron, who was the lead engineer on that, and I worked with him. You know, we set up in this back warehouse room at Rumbo. I had all these RCAs, and I said and Dwayne was like, "Really? You want to try it?" I'm like, "Man, check them out." And he kind of had his mind blown, but we also blew ribbons all the time. And I was sending ribbons to New York for this guy, Clarence Kane. He had a company called ENAC, which was Kane backwards. And he was the re-ribbon guy. Mm-hmm. And he was the RCA guy. And I think maybe his son, maybe that company's still around. I haven't re-ribboned an RCA in a long time. But we were re-ribboning a lot of RCAs because, you know, we were using 77s and 44s. And the only mic that you could get up relatively close that I know Eddie Kramer used, I think, back on Jimi Hendrix, was a Beyer 160. But that's a different sound. That's almost more like a condenser mic. But there's something about the figure 8 that I love. But I do love it in conjunction with a dynamic mic and really just either a good Neodyne 57 or just a 57. So I'm a big 57 Royer guy. And then I'll use a 67 a few feet back, and then maybe a farther back room mic on solos and stuff. But on rhythm parts, I don't really need unless it's a very specific rhythm part that wants a lot of room or something on it. Generally, the figure eight configuration of a Royer, either 122 or 121 or 122V, and they've got a new one coming out that's called an R12. That's a great mic. It'd be out like in a month or two. I don't know when this podcast gets released, but we just did a bunch of tests on that mic, and that mic's killer. So I'm a huge Royer guy, and I know people like the AEAs. Those work great, and there's some other ribbons, and then there are other ribbons that are sort of fakers that aren't really as good. And since Royer was the company that came out with a ribbon mic that you would not blow up close in phase with a 57, everyone's been trying to chase that because that's the deal. If you don't have yourself in phase, you can't really use both mics in a nice sort of almost equal amount. And I use them like EQ. The 57 I place in a place that sounds good, and it's the brighter mic, and then I bring in the Royer and it brings in the bottom. And I generally don't EQ my microphones to tape, or, I say to tape, but I generally don't EQ them unless that bus of the two still really needs something that the two mics in conjunction still aren't giving. And so that's usually like an API or some other EQ like that, like a Chandler, EMI, and then maybe a LA3 or a 1176, depending on what I want out of the guitar. If I want to take off the spank of a spank and have it more compressed, or, that's all to taste. But the conjunction of a 57 and a Royer is a guitar sound for me that is, I can get a guitar sound in like 2 minutes if I know where the mics are placed perfectly and I have a flashlight.
Done.
Yeah.
A lot of guitar players don't like to double tracking their parts. How do you usually feel the stereo space without having the guitar sitting in the center competing with the vocals and the bass?
Now you move it over to the side and have maybe kind of cop the bit of the Van Halen thing in its own way, where you have like something moving to the other side, like a delay or a delayed reverb, or that room. You pull the room mic and put it in a place that on its own can be panned over, and you hear the space of the guitar.
How did you get that Slipknot guitar sound?
Oh, that's so funny. Before I tell you, I fucking met Max Martin one time, man. Max Martin, the fucking songwriter, biggest songwriter in the history of music, of pop music. I had gone to try to get the Bullet for My Valentine gig, and they flew me out to Sweden. So we were in Stockholm, and at the show that night, I went to go see him play and hang out. I'm sitting backstage, and I look up, and I'm like, oh, what the fuck is Max Martin sitting there? And he's hanging out. It turns out he's friends with the band, and him and his guy, Shellbach, that writes with him or whatever they do. First of all, they thought I was Swedish, right? Because I have some Norway in me, German. So I fit right in up there. Well, and so I said something, and they're like, oh, man, you're American? And I told them I was, and like, oh, shit, wait. You did, like, they knew, Shellbach knew that I was the guy that did the Slipknot record, and that was the first fucking question out of his mouth is, how did you get the guitar tones, man? And oddly enough, I pulled up Psychosocial yesterday just to kind of go back through it in case you had any questions about it, just to see what was going on. And one of the things about it is that those things, it's just, they're committed. There's two fucking tracks, Jim and Mick, left and right. That's it. And so we took, it was the same process I always use. 2 heads per guy, different heads, right? I don't know what they were anymore. I don't know, Mesa and something, Rivera for Jim, maybe. I'm probably way off on that, but whatever. Two heavy heads, right? Each one of those heads is going to go out to a cab, and I put a divider in between, and then the most important thing for me, man, is just I'm a 57 421 guy, right? But I like them neck and neck because I just feel like when two mics are on speakers a foot across, I don't know, maybe it's in my head, but I feel like they start to sound funny to me at least. So I just feel like it's more solid. But it was that, and we just ran them into it was Neve Pre's, Of course, that was a big budget record, so I made them rent me an ocean worth of Neves. And so that's about it. Yeah. And in the EQ, obviously we noodled a little bit with EQ, but it was one of those moments, it doesn't always come up that easy. It was just one of those moments where you had really good amps, really good cabs. I mean, it sounded good on their end of the deal. And then, so I just did what I did. And, I remember Jim, I heard him in the kitchen saying, I don't understand how we can, how it took us 3 weeks, all the time to get guitar tones, and we just got them in 3.5 hours. And so I contribute that to a little bit of just sheer fucking luck, like it just happened that whatever amp they were using at the time matched my technique of miking it and what I decided to do EQ wise on a Neve Pre. And boy, does it sound good. I listened to the raw track yesterday. I was like, oh,
yeah,
okay.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. Right. It sounds killer. Yeah.
So,
and of course, look, the Colin Richardson, the mixer on that record, obviously put his own spin. They're not identical to my tracking for sure. He's got EQ going on, makes them angry. Another good mixer story that, partially the EQ he's got is because I had to make a phone call, man. At the time, I was burnt, man. I was like, it was a tough record to make. It was a lot of characters, and some of which weren't really feeling my decision not to entertain their songwriting on the other side. I was dealing with the core songwriters myself. So I don't know if you heard all those stories, but no need to get into it. But so me and Joey were the really only two. To those guys' credit, they only Joey ever listened to the mixes. They're so confident and so rad and amazing that they know they're great. They don't care. They don't care. If it's whatever. I tried to play it for everybody. They're just like, yeah, cool. They don't really care. So me and Joey were like the stewards of the mix, right? And so the first one that came in from Colin was the normal style metal, right? And so there was the typical, all the normal stuff, all the vocal EQs were higher up. It's 8 to 12. And Joey's like, oh, this isn't us, man. This is not what this band sounds like. You got to mix it, man. You got to stay and mix it. I'm like, well, I already had this thing planned to go to Barbados. I was just going to take time off. And I'm like, oh, wait, what? And so I just called Colin. I told him, I said, dude, look, this is what's going to happen right here. I'm not staying here. I said, Joey's trying to, whatever. He wants me to stay here and let me and him mix it. I said, dude, do me a favor here. Look, I said, there was an article that the Clown had just done, Sean, and it said something like, this thing's like a fucking steel wrecking ball or some metaphor like that, right? And so I just told Colin, I said, look, this is, read that real quick, because I believe it was in Revolver or whatever. Just read that, and then I'll tell you, like something's got to be wrong with it. It's too right. It should sound like something's wrong. I said, for one, let's start vocal. Your EQs that are 8 to 12, let's bring them down. Make it bite, man. Crush that fucker with whatever you got, distressor, but bite more 3 and 4K. Make it pissed. Same with the snare drum. Not pretty. Mad. Bring it down, crack it down lower. Bring your bandwidth in the treble down to pain and crunch. Make it pissed off. Kick everything. And so that he heard it loud and clear, and it came back sounding like it sounds now. I mean, it came back crunching and just all fucking mad. Gematria kicks in. It is fucking game over. And so we were stoked at that point. And then we could just finally get into regular mix detail. What are we louder, whatever. Here's a tom sticking out over here on the left, whatever. And so that had a lot to do with it too, man. His EQ of that. So I'm circling back. I haven't lost the subject yet. In the guitar, yeah. His EQ of that certainly has a lot to do with it, and then whatever. He was mixing on a V3 Neve or something, man. So all those things matter.
Mm-hmm.
for the sound of that record. But yeah, the initial recording was not real complicated, man. Real basic shit that most people use.
Mm-hmm.
Just really good player. Those two dudes can play some fucking guitar. Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And why do you use the two heads? One it's more distorted, and the other one is cleaner, or something like that.
I don't know. It's just different, just to get more flavor in it. You know, I've done that forever. Yeah, that's Fallen was done that way.
Mm-hmm.
Every album, I think. Yeah, almost. Yeah, every single one. Everything I've done, I don't know. Because it's good. I mean, it's good enough, obviously. I mean, especially when you get into mix, I mean, probably you just get away with one amp. But, you know, there is the world of like, while you're tracking, it's the artist impression, right? You want to please the art. Like, that's why you want to get your drums like slamming for the artist. So they're inspired by it. So I kind of felt that I feel that way about every instrument, you know. So like guitar, man, you know, it's fun. You know, you have this entire setup, and every time we would throw a second, we put the two of them together a day. It's like, at least in that moment, it sounds amazing. It's like, all right, this is bigger and better. So there's more tone to it. And it would just sound good. I haven't had it fail, really. You know, it worked. I think Tribs did that with Mudvayne. I'm pretty sure, you know, something like that to the effect. But yeah, I've always just liked it. You know, probably could have got away with not doing it at all. You know, I probably, you know, obviously, I mean, it could be a Kemper, man, you know, and you get somebody good to make it's going to sound killer. That's the way it is.
Cool. Here's another question. Do you remember how the vocal recording process was for Evanescence, and what gear or techniques you used?
Oh, that one straight up was, I think we shot out some 47s, right? And you know, it's just I'm standard, man. You know, I'll shoot some mics out, but usually I don't. 47 always wins, you know, especially at a really big studio like that. They have those killer old school ones, man. So you pick one, you know, whatever. They probably would all work. We'd pick one out of like three. But that's definitely going through a 1073, and it's going to hit a blackface, and it's going to hit Pro Tools.
Mm-hmm.
That simple. The rest is all the hard work of just the performance things, going over that, competent and working parts. And for vocals, especially with that one, you know, with every album though, except for Slipknot, because it was so amazing. Corey blew it out. He knocked it out of the fucking ballpark to where I was like, okay, I should try to act like I'm doing something, but I didn't need to. It was a tough thing. I didn't want to fuck with perfect, you know, when I don't need to. That's a really hard thing to do as a producer, especially the kind of producer I am, where you know, I'm a musician and I'm willing to work for it. So yeah, with Amy, you know, all vocalists, I'll go over a span of time, you know, and we will start early as possible, start singing them, you know, that way you have review time. And then if I get them on a different song, and I know a part's really not all the way done on something we've done even 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. I think we revisited My Immortal even 3 weeks down the line, trying to get the outline of the bridge. You know, I think I've been alone all these years or time. I haven't heard it in a while. I think whatever that line is coming out of the bridge, I could never sit with the way we had it the first couple of rounds of it. So, yeah, and you start to realize, today is a really great day. Oh my God, she's singing really good. You know, let's go. After I've got what I need for that song that we're on, then if you still sound good, I'm going to go use you to try to patch other stuff while I got you in this moment. You know, because certainly the voice is weird, right? It changes daily. I mean, it's science, right? If you get a cold, if the temperature fucking changes, or if somebody upsets you, your emotions, you name it. You know, it's not like a fucking guitar where you pick it up and it's going to pretty much sound the same. Tune it right, whatever. But people, man, their mindset changes how they fucking sing. You know, you know, it's one of the big things I go through is coming back, even at the end of the song, like starting to go before we even get past second verse. I'm already looking at the first one if I liked it, and comparing the characters. Like, did I lose that guy? Because if I'm going like something wrong, it's probably not the performance. It's just we've lost the character. Mm-hmm. They're not saying like you were this person. Just show them. Look here, be that dude. right there. We started, usually most singers are just like, oh yeah, okay, that's, I got it. Yeah, this is a different thing. That's it. It's all headspace, really. But for the technical side, yeah, that was about it, man. And there's not a lot going on. I mean, just double places and a lot of, Amy writes these beautiful background counter melodies and all these things. So there's a lot of that going on. But it's pretty bone dry, man. Single voice verse, double voice chorus throughout most of Fallen, the whole thing. She's one of those people. Depending on the artist, it wrecks her to put a double in a verse. For me, I don't know. The personality kind of goes away. Some people it builds it really well. Like Chad from Mudvayne, his voice sounds great, double real good. A tight double sounds amazing like that. There's a number of people like that, and there's every now and then you get one where it's like it's not working out. It just sounds like I've lost my connection to this person real quick. Especially Amy. Amy's definitely that type of voice. But yeah, that's about it on the technical side.
How did Zakk Wylde record for Ozzy on Black Rain? What gear or techniques did you use?
It was amazing. I mean, Zakk's got his sound down. I think that was the other thing that worked between me and him too. Is he shows up. He's got JCM 800. It might have been modded. I'm not even sure. It might have just been one of his favorites. Just a Marshall cab, typical 412 with EVs. I don't think they're signatures, but whatever the EV big ass high wattage speakers are. Which, excuse me, as far as I know, he's the only guy that uses those. Very loud, very aggressive. And it sounded good. So it was such a simple process of, again, I'm not trying to make life complicated. He likes how his amp sounds. I just got to capture it up and not mess it up. So it was a 57, kind of a little close to the center, but kind of facing, outwards, kind of over the cone, but kind of facing towards the perimeter. And then I had a condenser with it, just typically taped to it. It wasn't even a high-end one, not even like a ribbon, like a Rhodes or something like that. I think it might have been a Shure. Honestly, I can't remember the exact microphone, to be honest. It was so long ago. But I had those two taped. Had them going through a couple of Neve, not like 1073s, but not like a real Neve. It was trying to think, maybe a BAE Neve, and just try to get the balance between the condenser. It was mostly 57. I originally set up more mics, like a 421, and went through the process and the audition process. But for what Zakk was doing, 57 was simple and easy and effective. And I know it's always going to work in the track. And then, marginal EQ, just rolling off a little bit of the bottom. Again, it was some kind of Neve, knockoff. I say knockoff, but they're, great preamps. A little bit of top end, roll off a little bit of bottom end, get the faders, the gain structure right. And, the best compliment I ever had was what Zakk told me after that, within a couple of hours. He said, how come when you're doing it, it sounds good like in an hour and other guys take like three days? And it was really just the simplicity of it. Like, it sounds good. Why are we trying to reinvent Zakk's wheel? Make it sound like he hears it, and your job is done. So less is more.
And how loud was the amp? Was it loud? Too loud, or
it was pretty. It was pretty loud, but it was built to take it. It was a very small guitar room as well. I should maybe mention that. How big would that little ISO booth have been in that place? Probably like possibly in like 4x6, like a small dead room, almost like an ISO box, really. And it's like, when you have those amps that they fit into the ISO boxes. And it was like 6 feet away from where I was sitting in a very well crafted studio. So, you could hear it a little bit, but not much. But it was pretty loud, but again, appropriately loud, like not overdriving anything, not pinning the speakers, not too much gain. Although I think for Zakk, it's mostly all the way up on that JCM. Uh, yeah, yeah, I'd say pretty, like, let's just say reasonably loud.
Cool.